Roger Moore was an incredibly well-known English actor, certainly most famous for his role as James Bond, but no doubt known to older viewers for his roles in and as Ivanhoe and The Saint. Roger Moore, knighted in 2007 for his charity work, could well be the portrait next to the definition of an English gentleman. Not only did he have an incredible reputation off-screen for being a very likeable and down-to-earth person, I think he exuded an aura of sophistication and class. I think he's perceived as a very classy guy, but he was from a very normal background.
I was very surprised to find out that he came from exactly the same place as me and was the son of a London policeman, which means that in the class structure, sort of lower middle class.
His father was a policeman, as well as being an amateur actor, and it was during an investigation into a burglary at the director Brian Desmond Hurst's house that Moore's father was able to get Moore a role as an extra in Caesar and Cleopatra. Whilst shooting the film, Hurst came to know Moore and paid for him to study at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. His fledgling career was interrupted by conscription into the army, and in 1946 he became a commissioned officer, after which he found it somewhat difficult to find more acting work. His first TV role and credited role was in The Governess in 1949, something I can't even find still images of. It was a live production of a Victorian mystery play, and according to the British University's Film and Video Council, no archival copy is known to exist. Oh. Moore's career, like so many, didn't get off to a flying start. He didn't quickly land a role that catapulted him to fame. Instead, he spent the better part of a decade struggling to become what I would call a successfully jobbing actor. In the early 50s, he supported himself with modelling work and acting in fairly small roles in fairly small movies. He was kind of famous as a knitwear model. Here he is when he was in Kraftwerk. There's a clip I used in my video about Vincent Price, where Price talks about actors having to have the discipline to survive. And I think that's exactly what Roger Moore had. If you look at the list of roles he was in, he spent a lot of time doing things that weren't anywhere near as successful as he needed them to be. He was rising through the billings slowly but surely, but I think a lot of people would have probably quit. He was also acting on stage after moving to New York in 1953.
And now I'm not sure if this is, if I can believe this, but people are explaining to me that one of your first American acting jobs was right here in this building.
Right here, 2 floors up, where they do Saturday Night Live.
In 8H, the big studio. Yeah. What did you do there?
It was 1953. And it was, the first job I had was for Robert Montgomery Presents.
In 1953, MGM got him to sign a 7-year contract. He had a bit of a meteor part in The Last Time I Saw Paris, and got a starring role in Diane 2 years later, which led to MGM dropping him because of the film's commercial failure. The Last Time I Saw Paris and Diane were significant roles for Moore.
I'm no play actor.
But they weren't quite the boost his career needed. Moore went back to England and struggled for another 2 years, before landing a role which I don't think led him to the big time, but established him as a familiar face. Ivanhoe was a series of 39 episodes following the adventures of Sir Wilfrid Ivanhoe and his conflict with Prince John in the times of Richard I, loosely based on the 1819 novel by Walter Scott. Robert Brown, who would play M in some of the Bond films, was a series regular, and Ivanhoe, as a series aimed more at children, perhaps embedded a familiarity with Roger Moore in a generation that appreciated him as Bond even more because of it. After Ivanhoe, Moore went to the US for a leading role in The Miracle, followed by his role in TV western The Alaskans, filmed in California, obviously, where he appeared in all 37 episodes. After that, the 4th series of Maverick, appearing in 16 episodes as Beau Maverick. Weirdly, a part Sean Connery tested for, but turned down.
Molly, you've got to believe me, it was all for the good.
For the good, was it? And I suppose it was for the good that you, Annie, talked me into trying to escape with the horses and go meet your blooming father, who's no relation?
Oh, what a terrible thing to happen. Then came his big break. The Saint, which incidentally Vincent Price voiced some of when it was a radio series, ran from 1962 to 69, and was very successful in the UK and US.
Lucky you got quick reflexes. I'd better drive you home.
It was originally filmed in black and white because, according to Moore, NBC didn't believe it was adequate for their network. But syndication figures show that The Saint's first 2 series, in black and white, received better ratings than NBC's average. So in 1966 it became part of the network's evening schedule, and it ended its run in primetime slots in the UK and US in 1969, in colour.
Is this an excuse me, or can we all join in?
Sorry.
The TV series The Persuaders made Moore the highest paid TV star in the world. After that, Sean Connery said that he didn't want to play Bond again, for real this time. Kind of. Moore had played Bond in an episode of Mainly Millicent in 1964, and in many ways the way he played Bond was a continuation of Simon Templar from The Saint.
There are 2 ways to disable a crocodile, you know.
I don't suppose you care to share that information with me?
I'd get calls from Cubby saying, Harry thinks you're too fat. And so I'd take weight off, and then Harry would call and say, Cubby thinks your hair's too long, get your hair cut. And I kept on losing weight and getting my hair cut. And in the end, I got so desperate, I said, why didn't you get a thin actor with short hair in the first place? Why did you put me through this absolute torture?
How times have changed, because now, if you ask me, the world is crying out for adequate representation in the form of a fat James Bond. Moore starred in 7 films as Bond, the same number as Sean Connery, counting Never Say Never Again, which Connery did in 1983. Despite the character's immense success when he was portrayed by Sean Connery, I think Moore did a really good job in making the character his own. He never took himself or Bond too seriously, and I think his era of Bond relied more on humour than any other. Sean Connery has said that Roger Moore's Bond was more of a parody.
The fundamental difference is that I played Bond, and in this one as well, with the reality, credibility, and his is a sort of parody of the character, as it were, in that situation, so that you will go for the laugh or the humour at whatever the cost of the credibility or the reality. I think he took another direction with it that way and acquired an entirely different audience.
Your attitude to Bond is much different, say, to Sean Connery's, isn't it, as an approach?
Well, I came into it after he was very well established. And obviously I couldn't play it in the same way, so I had to have a different approach. And I'm a lighter sort of actor than Sean.
Bond was certainly the role Moore is best known for, and he was at his peak as an actor when playing Bond. After A View to a Kill, he didn't appear on screen for 5 years, and he never pursued the big roles he perhaps could have gotten quite easily. In 1989, he was due to star as George in the theatre musical Aspects of Love, but pulled out 2 weeks before the opening night.
I mean, did you just chicken out? Did you say, I don't want to do this? What am I doing this for? I could be doing a movie and earning a lot more. Let's be honest about this.
I got panicky. I got very frightened. I realised that there was a little more to just singing in the bath and singing in the rain, rather. No, but than singing opera, which is what Aspect was.
Moore says he felt overwhelmed by the role and technically not up to the task. And I think, looking through some of his new and old interviews, he seems to be a very humble person, but also, on occasion, very shy. In interviews, old and new, he's very jokey, but also sometimes very guarded. He gives short answers, which are often really jokes, whenever he's asked about his personal life.
What made you do that?
Well, I mean, had been part of my life.
Not the most flattering portrayal of a man who was her young husband?
It wasn't. The marriage was doomed. It was doomed.
A criticism of Moore is often that he had a limited range, and that seems to be something that he agreed with. However, I think unlike many actors, Roger Moore was a genuinely modest person.
What is your theory on acting? For you personally, your acting team?
Say the words don't bump into the furniture.
I think The Man Who Haunted Himself, directed by Basil Dearden, shows that Roger Moore's range was far greater than just James Bond.
Listen, just tell me the name.
What name? What are you talking about?
Is it blackmail? Who is he? Where is he? I want to see him!
But I am Harold Pelham of Freeman, Pelham and Dawson.
I'm Pelham. I am!
Bond made him famous, but it was his personality and his dry humour that I think kept him around and kept him relevant.
Finally, Sir Roger Moore has taken time out to write his autobiography, and I was amazed. I would have thought you must have been asked in the past and you must have been tempted to do this before. Why leave it so long?
Well, I was always frightened to write about people I knew. You know, I said, if I'm going to say something, it's embarrassing, they might be upset. So I had to wait for everybody to die.
Whilst Bond was no doubt the height of his acting career, he never disappeared from the public eye, acting, often in voice roles, until his death in May 2017. I'd love to know what you think of Roger Moore, and what you think of him as Bond, and what your favourite TV or movie series of his was. As ever, thank you for joining me. Like, comment and subscribe, and you can also follow me on Twitter and like my Facebook page, and all of that. Next time I'll be discussing why film adaptations of video games so often struggle critically and so often are financially risky. Just to prove that Roger Moore was a great storyteller, I'll leave you with this.
Well, my aunt, who lived with us at that time, came home with a monkey. His name was Jimmy. He was a rhesus monkey. Rhesus monkeys don't use their tails to climb, so they have to use their hands, which means when they're carrying food, they put it in their pouches that they fill up. The whole banana goes in there. Sorry about that. And they...
Looks like you taught Lana Turner something from the other things.
Lana taught me. And there was an elderly lady who liked to come up with tea in the garden. And one day she was walking up the garden path and she had a hare in a bun. And Jimmy reached down from a branch and got her hair and pulled her up like this, and she screamed through the teapot at him. And Jimmy... Oh, he was wonderful.